My name is Amna R and I'm a journalist and editor. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this unique and engaging session with historian, polyglot, communications guru, and gastronome Lukas Kubin, who's here from Prague in the Czech Republic. Briefly, a little about Lukas. He is an Orientalist and traveler with a deep passion for Islamic art, architecture, and cultural history. Educated in Prague, Japan, and the UK, he specialized in Islamic art and architecture at Oxford University. Importantly, Lukas is a dedicated advocate for popularizing history. He combines rigorous scholarship with engaging storytelling. His expertise spans civilizations such as the Nabateans and Al-Andalus, and he has lectured at esteemed institutions, recently presenting at events by the Spanish Embassy, the Turkish Embassy in Prague, and the Instituto Cervantes, also in Prague. Beyond academia, he's an avid explorer and food enthusiast, always seeking to bridge cultures through knowledge and experience. Today, Lukas will give us an illustrated talk on the legendary city of Istanbul, one of my favorite cities, and of course, of many of you in the audience. And I'm sure it's an exciting, really looking forward to the presentation. Lukas will explore the city's fascinating journey from ancient Byzantium to the grandeur of Constantinople to the vibrant global hub of modern Istanbul. So, Lukas, we will have a Q&A session after your presentation, but if you'd like to say something before we start.
Well, it's really fascinating to see what everything am I. It's like whatever I did and everything. But what I would like to say is that I'm really delighted to be in Lahore. It's for the first time for me in Pakistan. And to see young crowds interested in literature, history, arts, and everything like this, it's very fascinating. And I was told that there will be a match between India and Pakistan in this hour, so I thought maybe nobody will come, but look at you, you came, and thank you for this. So I think we should be definitely
Yes, so let's get on with the presentation and then we'll talk later.
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. And I believe in storytelling. I think in the age of computers and phones, we basically lost ability to talk to each other. I mean, you see people sitting in cafes and they don't talk to each other, they're watching their phones. And I think we need to come back on stories because we love stories. And the stories and storytelling, ever since we walked the earth, was the only way how to transfer knowledge. A long time before writing was invented. So I will be like Shahrazad a bit tonight, from the tales of 1001 Nights, and I'll be telling you many stories of the city which I adore. And I will also endeavor to bring a little bit of Eastern Mediterranean sunshine into the room this evening, because my subject is indeed Istanbul, the queen of cities, the greatest city on earth. And I would like to investigate whether the city deserves all those titles. And I'm going to play my cards straight away, and I'll say it does. There's no doubt that it's the most extraordinary city on earth. And throughout my lecture, we will discover why it is this extraordinary city. So let me start with the story. The story how Bosporus got its name. There's a myth that Zeus, the king of the gods, had an affair with a mortal priestess called Io. It was kind of his way. He always had an affair with mortals. He really enjoyed it. But unfortunately for Zeus, Io was a priestess of his wife, Hera. So I can imagine Hera was not too pleased to know about this affair. So Zeus turned Io to a cow to protect her from the wrath of Hera. But Hera was not fooled, and she sent kind of horrible horsefly to sting Io relentlessly. And Io was wandering around the world, and then one day she was passing a very narrow strait of water, and she basically went over to get rid of the horsefly. And that's how the Bosporus got its name. It's bos in Greek, is ox, or cow, and poros means a passage. So that's how we got the name Bosporus. It was believed that Istanbul's history stretches back for around 2,700 years approximately, to the founding of Byzantium. But it was quite recently, like around 10 years approximately, when they were digging Marmara metro line in Istanbul, they discovered incredible thing. They discovered a Neolithic settlement, which dates back for around 8,500 years approximately. And areas around Istanbul, in the caves, there were bones and marks on the caves. They're basically 250,000 years old. So the history of Istanbul goes back for around 8,500 years. What you're looking at is actually the pre-Bosporan mark. So even long time before the Bosporus was created by nature, this was the settlement. So you can see the footprints of people over time. It was an incredible place. It was very green. We found approximately 9,000 species of flora. There were oaks, pistachios, figs, and so you can imagine that you wake up in the morning and then you go and pick your fresh pistachios for breakfast. So, I mean, it was a paradise-like place. And from that period, we also have the world's oldest wooden coffin, or those wild cow bone spoons. But this paradise was destined to end. So around 5,600 BCE, there was a huge natural geoseismic event which basically created Bosporus as we know it today. So during that time, the Black Sea was created, and the Bosporus channel was basically created. And around 6 years ago, Liverpool University, they basically found out that while Bosporus was created, there's a freshwater river running underneath the Bosporus, which runs the opposite direction. So all the sediment and silt when Bosporus was created, basically what happened, it trapped water, fresh water, underneath. And that's why there are kind of strange currents throughout the channel. And if this river were on land, it will be the 6th largest river on Earth. So I think it's quite fascinating. We always kind of tend to think and say that Istanbul connects east and west. True, but it also connects north and south. So from very far north, Russia, you can go and travel across Bosporus, and your next stop will be shores of Africa. So we have to think about that it was basically connecting east and west, but also north and south. So this incredible event created the city of basically the area of where Istanbul was basically founded, or Byzantium at the time. And so people started to look forward to come to this place. And so in approximately 627 BC, the Greeks came in. I'm big fan of the Greeks. I think they're really amazing, but they are inventors of history, and as they are inventors of history, they are extremely good at writing themselves into it. So they just came in and they said, well, it was a virgin territory, and we found Byzantium. It's not entirely true. Archaeology shows us that they were a Thracian population already before. So I think the Greeks, they kind of trade in basically their presence into the city. And so the Greeks came in, what they usually do, they build a Greek city. But the time they came in, they settled not on the area of the old Istanbul as we know it, but on the other side, on the Asian side, where present-day Kadıköy is, and Herodotus, he actually called them, it's like, city of the blind, and then why blind? It's like, why on earth they built it there if the most important part of the land is over there? So, but anyway, they came in, they basically settled, they built the Greek city as they usually do, so they built gymnasia, agoras, and they made it a very essential Greek city. But even Greece, they could not really get off this easternness of the place. So it's kind of this eastern vibe refuses to go. And we know it from the gods and goddesses it was worshipped at the time in Byzantium. So my favorite ones is the Cybele, the goddess of fertility. She was, Romans call her Magna Mater, the mother of fertility. And she was the goddess also of the gateways. She allowed access to the different worlds. And I think Istanbul is kind of a city where you can enter different worlds. Her basically cult was masterminded by kind of eunuch priests called Galais. And those Galais, she insisted apparently that those Galais would be self-castrated with a shard of pottery. And Romans and Greeks, they kind of, they were disgusted with them, and they're just like, that's very appalling, we don't like them. But they, on the other hand, they loved them in a way. They invited them for parties and entertainment, and they sort of fetishizes them in a way. And they were usually, they wore long hair, a lot of makeup, so they were basically coming and entertaining at the parties. As is another premier goddess of the city, it's Hecate. It's a witch goddess, very powerful. She's also a goddess of gateways and guardian of the crossroads. And her sanctuaries were usually built next to the gates of the city, and dogs were sacred to her. And dogs were often sacrificed, unfortunately. So so both are protectors of the city and also a reminder of unseen forces that shapes this universe. So here you can see there's a coin from 1st century AD. You can see Hecate on it, and also very old symbol, the crescent moon and a star. And it's kind of funny sometimes to talk to Turks in general, and they always say, like, because for many Turks, their history starts with the Ottomans. They don't much care about the more ancient civilizations, and they always say, like, why are you bringing this ancient history? It's not very relevant for us anymore. And then they're waving at you with the Turkish flag. So you can see there's this there's an indirect line with the symbol of Hecate on a Turkish flag, but it was adopted by Islam at the end, but it's very Eastern old symbol. And after the Greeks, the Romans, I think the Romans were nothing but opportunists. They saw that the city of Byzantium is very rich, very desirable, and also very strategically located. So they found out that if they're going to seize the city, they're going to make a lot of cash, because the boats passing through Bosporus can be taxated and then can make a lot of money. And they started, but the Rome, they already started to look east ever since from 2nd century BC, when the Republic is over, and they are looking east. And there are treaties, there are letters coming from Rome to Byzantium. And they started to build kind of a very large project called Via Egnatia, which is basically the way which comes from ancient time Dyrrachium, which is present-day Duras in Albania, through the Balkans and ends in Byzantium. So you can still see, in some of the parts of the Via Egnatia, you can see still the roadblocks, the original ones. You can walk on them, actually. So for them, they understood it's an important place to be and to go. So the Emperor Septimius Severus, in 2nd century AD, he basically went on to the city. He raged the city, he almost burned it to the ground, destroyed almost everything. But with every destruction, the city became larger and more beautiful because then they invested a lot of money into it, and he in particular started to build the large hippodrome, which was one of the largest in the ancient world. And you might not know, but as we know, the city had three names. There was Byzantium, Constantinople, and Istanbul. But for a very tiny period of time, it had another name, which called Augusta Antonina. And it was the name, one of the surnames of Emperor Caracalla at the time. So it's kind of interesting that not only three, but actually a fourth name appeared. What you're looking at, does anybody know, actually, how many of you have been to Istanbul? Oh, fabulous, what a civilized audience, amazing. What you're looking at is the Million. It's actually one of the most important ancient reminder of Roman times in Istanbul. It's not very appealing monument, to be honest. But it's one of the most important ones because from the very point, all the distances across the Roman Empire were measured. So it's not in Rome, but it's in Byzantium. And you can still see it's in a corner right across the Hagia Sophia, so you can still come in and see it. They're doing reconstructions these days. It was fascinating that when I went to Istanbul last year, we were just sitting in a newly reconstructed museum, the digital museum for Hagia Sophia, and there was a guy, the director of the museum. We were having coffee, and he just came in, and he said, we discovered something last year. Would you like to see? I was like, obviously, of course. And then underneath that building, they discovered, when they were renovating the building, they discovered basically the most preserved part of the hippodrome from the 2nd century AD, with the Roman coins in it, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's all basically like intact. It was all full of rubbish, so they had to clean it up, but it's fascinating. It has been discovered basically 12 months ago. So when I was talking about the tunnel underneath the Bosporus, not only they discovered the Neolithic settlement, but they discovered this incredible find of the 37 shipwrecks. But not only the shipwrecks themselves, but also with their cargo. And in most of the shipwrecks, they found amphorae of wine. I will come back to that wine topic later. And also they found a lot of animal bones, like ostriches, lions, big cats, because it was the new Rome at the time, so they brought big cats for the gladiatorial fights as well. And they were eating ostriches, they were eating donkeys and bears, so when all those bones were discovered. There's a kind of funny story. In one of those boats, they found out a skeleton of a dog, and that dog had a broken paw, and well, his owner, apparently, kind of mended it with a kind of splint. So it was kind of moment of care preserved in time. So, but unfortunately for the dog, we think why all those shipwrecks ended up on the sea because of the tsunami. So this dog was cherished and loved and then drowned. So when I was talking about the wine, so I can see this amphorae full of wine. As a historian, it's interesting sometimes because it's the sources were telling us that Istanbul, the Byzantium, was the city where a lot of drinking was involved, and obviously there was not much of evidence to it. But then you discover that in most of those boats there were amphorae of wine. So it's really interesting that it's actually adding up to the story that it was a kind of boozy city as well. And I would say something like Amsterdam, present day, like a lot of things happening, and then you go and you lay your head down, and so whatever happened in Byzantium stayed in Byzantium. So it was boozy city, but it was also a blessed city in a way. And it was thanks to this man, it's the Constantine the Great, which he gave the city its name. I think he did a lot of terrible things, like one of them, he killed his own son, he let his wife burned in hot bath. But he also did remarkable things. He built a city where social justice is codified. So he built, there were safe houses for homeless, there were public bakeries for starving people, and there were a lot of like places where people could, refugees come in and so on. And also he made it kind of aura, kind of religiously important. In Constantinople at the time, nothing religiously really happened there, but he kind of was able to make this aura of significance, and he brought up to the city different relics, and he definitely changed the time, because he was the one who turned from paganism to Christianity. And when he left the city, basically died on the deathbed, he was baptized. There were more than 50% Christians at the time. And he erected several monuments, but one of the monuments still stands. It was a lot higher than it is now. It's the column of Constantine. He basically, on the top of that column, most probably there was a statue of god Apollo, or Constantine himself, or Jesus Christ, or Sol Invictus. We don't know, but it was definitely a majestic column which was seen across the Bosporus Channel, so you can see it from far away. And to make kind of religiously important, make it religiously important, he also said that the very acts of Noah, when he built his ark, was put into the column. And when you're going down further down, there were like 5,000 the panniers, the bread which Jesus Christ was feeding for the crowd. And to make like a pagan gods even happy, he said that there's a palladium of goddess Athena from Troy, buried actually in the grounds of the column. So he did this monument, and it had a very religiously significant aura. So he can see that Constantinople and Istanbul and Byzantium was kind of impregnable. You could not really get through, and it took some time for Mehmed II to actually went through, and the Muslims to actually conquer the city at the end. So you can see there's the walls of Constantine and the walls of Theodosius, and so you can still walk large part of the walls today in Istanbul. And on the right down you can see it was the gate, the Golden Gate, which is still partly standing, so you can still go in and see it. When I talked about Constantine, what he did to the city, one very important thing he did was that he invited refugees, and ever since from 4th century AD until very today, there are refugees coming in, and I don't see any other city in the world which would have that many refugees at this time than Istanbul. There's over 5 million Syrians, and and imagine that it has been a city of refugees ever since the 4th century. When the end of Granada in 15th century, there were lots of Muslims came also to Morocco, but as well to Istanbul, and a lot of Jews also. And this is the kind of touching picture from the refugees from the First World War. There were Muslim orphans actually housed in one of the greatest mosques in Istanbul. And one of my, I think one of the greatest supporters of refugees was my favorite character, Theodora, Empress Theodora. What a fascinating girl. So let me tell you a story of Theodora. Theodora, she started on a bottom of a pile. She started life as a daughter of a prostitute and a bear keeper, bear tamer on Hippodrome. I would say Theodora is kind of example of social mobility. She was also a prostitute, and she was providing kind of stimulating entertainment on Hippodrome during the chariot races. And I'm sorry, ladies, it's a bit early, but she was like specifically skilled in anal pleasures. And her amazing, she was very athletic apparently, and her famous like a thing she was able to recreate was the recreating a Greek myth. And one of their favorite was the myth of Leda and the swan. So you have a Spartan queen, Leda, and a swan, which was Zeus, again, turned into swan and raped Leda, and basically Helen of Troy is the product. But anyway, so she was doing this, recreating that whole scene on Hippodrome. She could not afford a swan, so she had a goose. And the grain was involved, and it was apparently very erotic, and it was really fascinating. And she even mentioned about herself that she regrets that she doesn't have more openings in her body for pleasures than 3. So, so she had very fruity reputation, but she was also incredibly smart. She then left Constantinople to Alexandria. She turned and converted to Christianity. Then she came back to Constantinople, and she basically slept her way up to the court. And we can only imagine how she attracted attention of the Emperor Justinian, Emperor to be at the time. And they two were in love, and they basically married. But he, Justinian, had to change the law so the emperor can marry an actress. And finally he did, and then they duet, and they were a remarkable couple. They did incredible things to the city, and Theodora, coming from the bottom of the pile, ended up as an empress of the 1,000,000 square miles. So what a fascinating story, from the prostitute coming as an empress of the Byzantine Empire. And she also did a lot for women. So she did safe houses for women. She outlawed forced prostitution, and she also put a kind of like a funny law that a man has to ask their wives twice before getting into debt. So it's kind of funny. So once, no, 2, maybe. So, and imagine we're talking about a 6th century AD. It's fascinating. And Justinian also was kind of fascinating figure. He basically did endeavor that he went throughout the empire, and he brought all the laws and edicts available at the time, complete them, and until there today, our civil law is still based on Justinian's ones, the Corpus Juris Civilis, Justinianus. So it's really incredible that from 6th century AD we still have something based on his work. Theodora, she really loved bathing. One of the stories is telling that when she was going to present-day Bursa, so she had to go across the Sea of Marmara, and she wanted the world to know that she's going. So she went with no less than 4,000 courtiers on the journey to have because they are in Bursa, in the present-day Turkey, there's a hot spring, which is still running, and so you can still go there. And we presume that she died in the age of 48, approximately, and she died of a cancer. And we believe that the reason why she went to those baths was the relief from the cancer. She had the breast cancer, and she had even the first world recorded mastectomy, actually, this time. So does anybody know what you're looking at? No. Okay, so it's Tintagel in Cornwall, in England. It's during the excavations, they found out remarkable discovery. They found out the largest amount of Byzantine coins in whole Western Europe. And so it also shows that how Constantinople was interconnected. So far away in present-day Britain, you find out the largest amount of coins. So apparently there was a trade, and so from very edges of China and India to the other side of the world, in Western England. So Justinian, he was in love with Britain, actually, and but he unfortunately imagined Brits to be a bit of savage, and he introduced a kind of they call it subsidies for the barbarians of Britannia. So how lovely, isn't it? But then nothing lasts forever. In 532 AD, there was a huge blast. We call it Nika riots, where it was cause of many things together, of high taxes, and it was fueled by political corruption, and also that the favorite factions didn't win the race at Hippodrome. So imagine that, like in present-day football or hockey or whatever, will turn up into the riots. So they basically happened such a thing in this time. And so then Istanbul is a great city for the revolts because it has very large spaces, but then it has also very narrow streets. So you can suddenly appear in a large square, but you can disappear very quickly in very tiny streets. So it was very not easy to work this out. So Constantinople was basically burned to the ground, and the former Hagia Sophia, built by the Constantine, was destroyed. And I always like to think on ancient things from the modern perspective. So, and Theodora and Justinian, basically, they were, in front of the decision whether to leave or to stay, because there were people rioting at the Hippodrome. It was connected to the palace, and basically it's Justinian was ready to go, and he said, like, our ships are ready, we can just leave. But Theodora, she actually showed she's twice as mad as Justinian, and she said, well, you can go, but I'm not going anywhere. And in the present day time, I think she would send an SMS. And she said that, the purple, which was the color of the emperors, will be the great funeral shroud. So she said, I'm not going. They basically asked the very loyal generals, with very few soldiers. They used Hippodrome as the kind of cage, and they unfortunately massacred around 30 to 40,000 people. But they retained their rule in Constantinople. And after the Nika riots, they decided to rebuild the city. So they want to know that the world will know that who is in charge. So they built this magnificent Hagia Sophia church, and which was the third in a row, and it's absolutely enormous. Still today, if you go inside, you're blown away with its magnificent size and the dome, which is it's totally incredible how that dome still stands, and it's like an open air, incredible structure. And imagine that for 1,000 years, this was the largest religious building on earth, until the cathedral in Seville in 1506 was built. And inside there are very intriguing mosaics. There's an interesting story about, especially that the seating of Pantocrator Jesus, that you probably know that one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, the Zeus statue in Olympia, the statue actually was brought to Constantinople. And unfortunately, it was probably burned in one of those riots. But in general, that some of those Byzantine masters, craftsmen, they were using the statue of Zeus as an example to creating the seated Jesus actually on the mosaics throughout the churches in Byzantium, in Constantinople. So there's really fabulous mosaics. After the Nika riots, they also completely changed the structure of the palace, and they just want to be ready for any other riots to come, that they will be very self-sustainable. So they built a palace connected to not only Hippodrome, but as well as the granary and a very large project, which is the Basilica Cistern. It's one of the most fabulous places in Istanbul to visit. It has been rediscovered in 16th century because the people were living above, and they were digging their wells, and they were basically getting fresh fish out of the underneath. So they were just wondering, well, what's underneath? And then they basically discovered this fabulous place. There's an old like a statue of Medusa, which is turned. So there's a story that she's turned because you don't turn into a stone if you're looking at her face. So in 949 AD, the city was very beautiful. It was a jewel. But what Jews do, they attract thieves. And so the times and times again, Muslim forces were attacking the city 12 times, but they were rather unexpected invaders, the Vikings. You would not imagine that Vikings would come all the way to Constantinople, but actually they did. And they had kind of love and hate relationship with the city, because they were in love with the silk which was produced in Constantinople at the time. So the city decided to pass a law, it's a very funny law, that if the Vikings, 50 at a time, will come through the particular gate and they won't rape anybody, they will get free bed and breakfast. So it was really fascinating. And as they loved this silk, you can imagine this huge Vikings with a helmet, marching on a campaign with a beautiful purple silk scarf. There's even the Viking inscription in Hagia Sophia. They call it Sophia runic inscription. It's called the Halfdan. They don't know exactly what he was. He was a member of Varangian guard, which is the guard of the emperors, or a trader or traveler, or it was a legendary figure, most probably. But another thing happened in 1204, and as historians, you go through kind of appalling periods of humanity, but and then one of the very appalling one was the one of the Fourth Crusade in 1204, and it's absolutely terrible what happened at the time. That there was a Fourth Crusade going to the Holy Land, but it was diverted to Constantinople because they've been told that they're kind of wrong kind of Christians there. And so basically the inhabitants of Constantinople were looking over the walls on the Christian people, and they were thinking, oh, they are just allies. But actually, they were not. They came and they destroyed the city and everything in it. And what they didn't destroy, they just stolen. So it's really very appalling time of history. And they were killing children and mothers and raping, women in churches, and it was really horrible. And they've stolen a lot of things, which at the end, those things then fed kind of Renaissance in Italy. One of the things they've stolen is the quadriga of those horses. They're actually in St. Mark's Square, on the cathedral in Venice. But there were a lot more things actually. So the city basically was gravely wounded. It recovered afterwards, but not completely to the splendor it was before. And then, obviously, the Ottomans came in. So in 1453, Sultan Mehmed II, after 53 days approximately of a siege, he basically entered the city. I have to say that it was not something like a completely, clash of civilizations. It was more like kind of regime change. So there's one, and then the other comes in, and because the Mehmed did a very clever thing. He did not expel everyone, and he basically just let it be as it was, and he let other religions to thrive, and people could go attend their masses, and then prayers, and so the one important fact of Ottoman Empire is that it was very cosmopolitan, and inclusion was the part of their strategy, not exclusion, not expelling, as the other, like the Christians did. So, so he didn't reinvent everything, but he basically thrived on what was there already. So Ottomans were kind of Renaissance princes. So the policy of tolerance, the commissioning translations of the arts and literature and the classical world. So, and then I think thanks to this approach, they lasted for over 600 years. When he took Constantinople, he was aged around 10 to 1. He was very educated, he spoke several languages, and after almost 700 years, he fulfilled the prophecy which was once said by the Prophet Muhammad, that Constantinople will be one day Muslim. He did a very smart thing that for the 53 days he could not really get through the walls, which you saw were quite significant. So he had a very smart idea that if you're familiar with the geography of Istanbul, so basically he could not, there was a huge chain over there, so no ship can pass through that place. So he basically one day, there's a Galata tower here, so he cut all the forest and rolled on wood. He moved the ships to this part. So the very morning, the Constantinople woke up and they found out that the Ottomans are actually inside. And it was basically the end of Constantinople. It was also the beginning of a story of Topkapi Palace, one of the greatest palaces in the world and one of the most famous museums. And there's also quite fascinating site in Istanbul called Maiden Tower. There's a legend that the place already is there from, recorded from 4th century BC. And there's a legend that there was a prophecy that the daughter of one of the Byzantine emperors will actually die at the age of 18 when she will be bitten by a snake. So the reason why the emperor decided to put the daughter on this secluded place to save her from the prophecy. And when the birthday came, she got the basket of fruits, and there was a snake in it. She got bitten, and the prophecy was fulfilled. Recently, they did fabulous renovation of the place. You can get the boat from Karaköy. You can go there, and they have amazing. They're selling amazing chocolate over there. So, and then in 1502, there's an interesting story with the Sultan Bayezid II. He actually called for the bridge building competition. Many craftsmen and many builders and architects, coming in and asking for the job. And one of them was no other than Leonardo da Vinci. So he was actually sending a letter to the Sultan about that he is able to build the bridge. So we have that letter. And he says, Leonardo, I, your servant, heard that you intended to construct the bridge from Istanbul to Galata, but you could not, because no expert could be found. I, your servant, I know how to make it. I could raise the arch so high that nobody would want to pass over, and because of its height, I could construct it in such a way that even sailing ship could pass under it. And he also said that I could also paint. Not a small ego, Leonardo, I would say. And then the Sultan, it was fascinating because, you know, Leonardo was such a praised artist, and the Sultan was like, Leonardo, who? So he didn't get the job. So it's kind of interesting. But his sketch, as you can see here on there's the letter, and then the sketch, which was the idea of Leonardo to build. And then they built this bridge, basically in, I don't know, several years ago, in some of the sites. Then how it would look like. It's absolutely fascinating how ahead of time it is. So in 1520, we can call it the golden age of Ottomans, with the Sultan called Suleiman the Magnificent. He's always also called Suleiman the lawgiver. I think he was one of the wisest sultans of the Ottoman Empire. He's known for military conquests and also reforms. He introduced a lot of new laws into the system, and he was a great patron of art. And I would say it's his connection to Mimar Sinan, which was the imperial architect. It was the best connection of a sovereign and architect, I think, in history, because what Mimar Sinan actually did to the city, and not only to the city, but all around, it's really fascinating. So he was one of the most important people in Ottoman era. He was very ahead of time. He built incredible amounts of sites, 84 mosques, 51 small mosques, 3 hospitals, 57 madrasas, 22 mausoleums, 48 caravanserais, 35 palaces and mansions. It's absolutely incredible. So he's that incredible that the Turks, he was actually most probably Armenian or Greek. It's not really clear. And the Turks, they so much want him to be Turkish. So in 1935, they exhumed his body just to, you know, do measurements and DNA tests to make sure that he's Turk. He's not. So, but ever since 2016, his skull is missing. One of the greatest projects he basically did is the Suleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul. It's such a fascinating building that you can imagine that in the 16th century he had to work out around 30 to 40 unknowns to be able to build this on a site which was on a hill. It's very seismic active, so there's a lot of earthquakes. And if you go there in Istanbul and you see the size of it, and it's absolutely breathtaking. Together with the madrasas, hospitals, it's a fascinating site. And one of the things which is very clever, that in order to sustain very good acoustics inside the mosque, he basically built inverted amphorais into the roof. So it basically echoes the sound. So imagine that an imam stands right in front of the mihrab and basically recite Quran and prayers. To each side of the mosque, there's only 10% loss of the sound quality. 16th century. Another amazing mosque which I really like, a kind of small one, is the Rustem Pasha Mosque built by Sinan in Istanbul. It's near to the Egyptian Bazaar. It has those intriguing Iznik tiles, mosaics in it. And one of my favorite plays actually is this, and the story of this place. It's Zeyrek Çineli Hamam. This is the picture from 1969. You can see the state of the building. It was basically a ruin. But they did an incredible job. So it took 10 years to rebuild, basically, and renovate the site. This hammam had an incredible story. It somehow belonged to the famous Barbarossa, the naval admiral of the Ottomans, and the legendary, the Hayreddin Pasha, that was his name. And he basically bought this hammam, so it has very long history. And he was one of the most feared commanders of the Ottoman age. And that's how the hammam looks now. So you can go there, it works as a galley, it works as a hammam, and there's a fascinating exhibition of how hammam works and how the whole story of this place. They're very famous, how it looks like now. And there's a very intriguing story of the tiles, because most of the original tiles have been lost. They've been stolen, they've been given, sold out, but some of the tiles actually been discovered in the collections of Victoria Albert Museum in London. And then there's like a long story of retrieving those tiles back. Unfortunately, they could not retrieve a majority of them, so they could not know exactly the patterns of the walls inside the hammam. So they somehow trying to recreate it from the other sites in Istanbul. So Ottomans brought many good things. One of the very good things they brought us was a coffee and drinking coffee in cafes as such. So basically it was the cafes, they provided kind of social space where usually men, gather, drink coffee, talk about politics, about poetry, history, literature, and culture. But as it was the place where public was meeting, it was sometimes a source of political unrest and a source of dissent at the time. So many of those cafes have been closed by the sultans, by the system. So I'm going to end basically with women. I think women are deliberately written off history, and I think we need them back, and we need to talk more about women in general. And I'm going to talk about not ordinary women, I'm going to talk about the women of the harem. When you say harem these days, many people will think about, oh, well, it must be this exotic, fabulous place where beautiful women are, and it's fantastic. Well, those are the paintings from 18th century, so you can see a lavish, fabulous place, beautiful girls, washing one another, and it's kind of erotic, amazing ambience. But it was not exactly like this, because the harem was part of royal household, as important as kitchen, basically, it was a terrible place to be, but it can be also a fantastic place to be when your skills reached basically the level that you can become a mother of the sultan, which is called valide sultan in Turkish, and it's not very many women actually reached that stage. Women of the harem were substantially rich, because in Islam they couldn't have money. They were having a lot of money, they were educated in arts and music, in Arabic, in the Quran as well. They were usually brought in from Eastern countries, and it was one of the most important element of the royal household. And there was one particular concubine, which was very famous. She calls Safiye, and she was taken from an Albanian village for around age of 13, and she became a valide sultan, the mother of the sultan. And at the time, there were lots of diplomatic incidents where, some British, some English traders were being caught by pirates, and there was a lot of diplomatic issues. And then we found out that the Safiye was actually having a correspondence with Queen Elizabeth I of England. And they were basically sending letters to one another. so I can read one of those letters. I can repeatedly mention Her Highness' gentility and praise for the foot dust of His Majesty, the sovereign who was Alexander's place. So it's interesting, they were calling basically the sultans as Alexanders and as also a Caesar. And I shall endeavor for her aims. So your letter has arrived and reached me. God willing, action will be taken according what you said. May you two always be firm in our friendship. God willing, our friendship will never die. So basically she was saying like, okay, well, the sultans and then they were doing their, men were doing their politics, but let us sort it out as between women, and there were all those issues what was happening at the time. And then, rather brilliantly, she was exchanging makeup tips. So she was, on account of Her Majesty being a woman, there are to be found in your kingdom rare distilled waters of every kind for every face, and odoriferous oils for the hands. Your Majesty would favor me. Oh. Favor me by sending some of them by my hand for this most serene queen. By my hand, so it's important that in harem there were many women, so she doesn't want those oils passed to another. Being articles for ladies, she does not wish them to pass through the other hands. So there we are. So Safia, as well as Theodora, started at the bottom of the pile, controlling this extraordinary city. And all stories help us to appreciate how important this place was. And I think, why do we need to get about Istanbul? That I think Istanbul teaches us a profound lesson that civilizations are not static. They rise, they fall, they reinvent themselves, and their greatest strength is not in resisting, change, but in embracing the change. And this is why Istanbul still stands for 8,000 years. Started as a settlement, is now one of the greatest cities on the planet. And it still remains on a crossroads of civilization between continents, and between past and future, and also between memory and reinvention. And for me, standing here in Lahore, a city with its own rich layers of history, we are reminded that past does not exist in isolation. The stories of our cities are connected in faith, in culture, in art, and whether at domes of Istanbul or the minarets of Lahore, or Ottoman sultans or Mughal emperors. I mean, the scholars or poets and travelers, they were all part of this great civilization. So as we leave today, let us remember Istanbul not as just a city of three names, but let us remember it as a symbol of resilience, of culture, a bridge between worlds, and reminder that history is not something behind us, but it's something we carry forward. So may the spirit of Istanbul inspire us in our own lives to build bridges, to nurture connections, and celebrate the richness of our collective heritage.
Thank you so much, Lukas, for a wonderful for telling us a story like Shahrazad of 1001 Nights. And so my first question to you is, how did you put it all together? How many times did you have to go to Istanbul? How did you, choose some of the stories that you wanted to tell? And it's a wide sweep of history that you were covering. Did it happen over a period of time, or did you do it quickly?
Well, it happened, I'm a historian by education, not by profession, and history was always part of my life. I really loved it, but I did it because of my hobby, not because of working as a historian. And
popularizing history for the layman. who would like to visually see something before they read a book or after they read a book. What kind of reactions have you had, especially from young people?
Well, I did the lecture at the university as well, and it was really interesting to see young crowds actually coming in, and then I was just visiting, so I'm not teaching any subject there. So, and they came to me, it's like, what subject do you teach? And we're applying immediately. So it was just kind of funny that seeing that the people, actually they like to talk about history and listen to it. But we've been taught history in a way that throwing dates and just memorizing. And that's not what history is all about. And it's not interesting. I hated actually history at the time. And because memorize all those days, who died when, and so on. And I just like recently discovered that it's not really important. The important is that to see the personalities from the context of the time, and what can we learn from them today. And I think there are plenty of things. And like Eduardo was talking about Al-Andalus and all Western civilization built on Islamic one, which was distorted in our textbooks. And we've been told that nothing of this ever happened. So I think we need to bring truth in it and talk about things which been changed deliberately and bring it among people, because I think that's important.
Tell us a little more about your personal relationship with Istanbul. How many times have you been there? What were your first loves? What have been your enduring, places that you keep going to again and again? That would be interesting for us.
Well, I've been like countless times. It's just I can recount. But ever since I went there for the first time, I mean, this place, you cannot describe in words. Like, it somehow, it's not only the place as such, the buildings, the architecture, but also people.
Never get to see all of it however many times you go, there's so much more left to see when you leave.
Exactly, and also I love this water in it, and the boats you coming on and you basically, it's different areas of the European part side and the Asian side. It's totally different world, and the young crowds in Moda and Kadıköy, and they're like this imperial Fatih area, and it's and all this great food together, because for me it's an important thing. So I will travel half the world for food. So if there's no food, I'm not going. So it's really Istanbul has it all, and the layers of history, basically whatever you step, it's fascinating.
You live in Prague. I mean, what kind of influences reached you in Prague when you were growing up, maybe? I mean, what did you read or what did you see in maybe museums around you which had something of Byzantium or the Ottoman Empire? Because it was a whole mix of, it went all the way up to there. The Ottomans were like a mix of Europeans and Asians, and so what did you imbibe from?
Well, actually it started not with Istanbul, it started with Asia. I mean, whenever I was born, my father came to hospital and he saw me lying in a bed, and he said, like, who's this Asian? To my mom, it's like, well, so, and I somehow inherit this spirit of seeking and then looking to the east. I always was like into the east. I will 1,000 times go to Afghanistan, but not to the US if I can. But it's.
You also speak fluent Japanese and have studied Japanology. So.
Yeah, that's true. So it started with China, because then we were living in a communist time, so there was nothing but China. So we were just, basically looking into those kung fu martial arts movies and eating those soups, dried noodles, just put hot water on. And that was it. There was nothing else than that. And then it developed into Japan, because I found Japan and Japanese culture more refined from Chinese. Mostly everything from in Japan came from China. The Japanese, they did it their own work and to make it very refined and very simplistic and minimalistic. So then I went that direction. I said, I want to speak the language, and I want to know about history. And I used to live in Japan for a while. And it's just, I cannot really live without traveling and talking to people and meeting people. It's just a fuel of my life. So you can imagine, COVID was completely a horror. I mean, you cannot travel, and you cannot even enter, you cannot even leave in front of your house because we were restricted of going out, and then it was one of the worst time of my life, actually.
What advice would you give to the modern traveler, like, you know, besides just going and seeing the main sites? What would you advise, maybe in
well, you have tourists and tourists. Unfortunately, for many Czechs, they travel to Turkey or Egypt, all-inclusive resorts. They've seen nothing. They don't really go on trips. They're just going, you know, spending 1 week in the resort and then just coming back. And it's also traveling has something to do with perception and prejudice and how Western media usually put it. And that's an important fact, that not to be scared and afraid and just go. I went to Iran last year, and I went there just in the time of Israeli rockets coming in, Iranian rockets coming back, and I said, well, and I got all those warnings from the embassy, not go, it's the, you know, life-threatening, you'll be kidnapped, whatever. I said, well, I'm going. So I went. It was a fabulous trip. The most amazing people I've ever met during my travels in Iran. And everybody behind the closed door, they'll tell you just like, oh, just forget the politics. I mean, people want to live, and so kind and so hospitable. But if you read what's written in the Western media, you would hardly even think of going. And it's about, it's kind of similar about Pakistan as well. I said some, and you know, some people around them going to Pakistan. I was like, what? Where the hell are you going? Why? You know, it's a perception. And unfortunately, many people, whatever they do not understand, they fear. And instead of fearing it, they just, I think it's better to investigate it and then to see, and then just, you know, see it and live it for yourself.
So you've done a wonderful presentation on the Nabateans as well, and you were telling me that you went to Saudi Arabia recently and presented there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Saudi Arabia is an interesting country. It was open quite recently to tourism, so immediately I saw that opportunity. I said, well, I'm going. And as I'm interested in ancient civilization, and one of the greatest sites from the Nabateans are actually in Saudi Arabia, as well as in Petra in Jordan, you know. I said, well, let's go. And I had my idea about what Saudi Arabia will be about. Everybody will be in a black sack, and then everybody will be, you know, free to move, and that's what I've been, you know, reading a lot. But actually I was surprised how interesting country, I mean, ordinary people, I'm not talking about politics, ordinary people are. It was quite open, very lovely people, very kind, very hospitable. Sites were absolutely fabulous, but you can see the influence of, for instance, unfortunately the US, that we wanted to get very good, like the traditional Saudi food in the middle of Riyadh. It was a hell of a job to find a restaurant which will serve traditional dishes. It was full of McDonald's, full of Burger Kings, and full of, basically, I see it for the first time, to see the kind of drive-in junk food city. So people would not even move out of their cars. They're just going drive-in, and all those guys from different countries were bringing them burgers, and they were eating it in their cars. I said, that's terrible. And so it was a bit of like thinking, what will happen to the future, that, you know, if it's recently opened and it's this there, so I'm wondering what will come in 25 years. It's going to be another Dubai, the Las Vegas of the East.
Well, I guess it's their problem. They have
Yes.
to deal with it. So going forward, and, you know, going back to the idea of popularizing history, are you going to be using social media to, you know, just pull people towards what you're trying to say? Maybe not present your complete works on the internet, but, you know, use different means. Have you worked out a plan? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, well, I did a little project at the end of January with a friend of mine. He runs a kind of small art cinema in Prague. And I was like pushing to him, well, let's do something on history. It's like, yeah, well, but we have to have it with movies as well. I was like, okay, so give me the list of the movies I'm going to pick, and I'm going to tell you I'm going to do a lecture on connected to the movie. And we found out there was an amazing movie, a Saudi movie at the time, called Hajjan. I totally recommend to see it. It's about the camels racing. It's such a simple story of good and evil, of an orphan boy and orphaned camel. They grown up together, and then they race together, and they win everything together. And then there was like an evil guy trying to kill the camel, and so on. And I wept at the end of the movie. It was like, oh my God, it's such a simple story, but we so much need this in our lives in this age of craziness. And then he said, okay, so I do this lecture on Nabati, connected to the movie happening in Saudi Arabia, and let's see what will happen. And it was full house. Everyone, because he said that usually people, when there's a movie, the screening is over, the people leave, but they all stayed. We had fantastic times, quite late in the evening. So basically, and I saw that people are interested. So we are going probably to do some more, and then he came with the idea. He saw this, like, it's fabulous. It's like, oh, let's do Indiana Jones. Or Mummy, we can do the Mummy, and you know, all the Egyptian stories and everything.
So what are you planning next, just before we close up?
So I'm planning the Mummy.
Oh, great. We look forward to that. So you'll be going off to Egypt?
Yeah, I'm going to Egypt actually in a month's time for some archaeological sites which are not open to public generally. So I'm really looking forward to it.
So good luck, Lukas, and thank you so much. We have one question. We are well over time, but please go ahead.
Thank you very much. A great presentation and great talk. So I've been to Vienna and Prague and visited Vienna Museum. There I saw the Ottoman gallery. They have a complete gallery of Turkish armory and weapons and ammunition. They still remember the siege of Vienna of 16th century, and they see Turkish as a threat and at times as invader, and sometimes they also call sick policemen of the Europe. So did you have ever such feelings?
I was living in Vienna for 3 years, and I didn't really much like the place, honestly. It was quite unfriendly to me, the Austrians. But imagine that there's the largest Turkish community in Vienna, you know. So it's interesting that they're living there. You know, it's I don't think it's anymore the issue.
Thank you, everyone.